everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's me and it's Nate. It is the first Wednesday of August. Fall is coming, my most dreaded time, because after fall, that means winter, and it means I have to go back to wearing shoes and long pants. So trying not to feel sad on that one. But Nate, how's things on Turf Island?
The usual.
Very turfy.
Very turfy, very fascist. It's cold, man. Like it's not really cold, but it was hot for like 10 days. And now it's gone back to more like slightly cooler side British summer, which feels fucking cold compared to, when it's in the 90s. Fahrenheit.
When you got to get used to, because last weekend we went to Chicago for the weekend, and my wife's just like, okay, so it's 75 degrees in Chicago, so pack accordingly. I'm like, I have no idea what 75 degrees feels like. I know, but it's been 85 to 90 degrees for the last 3 weeks, so it just completely erased what 75 degrees feels like. I guess I should take some jeans. Don't think I need a hoodie for 75 degrees. It was fine, but you have that, like, you completely forget what other temperatures feel like, because it's just like, this is just what it is now. And then when it does actually become cold, when it gets down to 65 degrees, that's when I start like cocooning inside of a shell and just be like, nope, I don't want anything to do with any of this.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's like I have been running and cycling a lot this summer. I'm trying to train long term to do an Olympic distance triathlon next year. I wouldn't be ready this year, so it's because it involves a lot of things, and the final event is a 10K, and so I need to really train on 10Ks. And so swimming is fine. I used to swim competitively. That's not hard to get back into. Even in an open water swim, if I can just practice in open water, 1,500 meters is not that bad.
Oh, look at that! The ginger can swim.
Yeah, well, exactly. Apparently, that's a secret conspiracy that we're all good at swimming.
Yeah, we've discovered that you can be racist against gingers by saying that they're good at swimming.
Yeah, well, swimming is a great sport for people who cannot stand the sun. So I think there's just that kind of a correlation without necessarily causation. Obviously, if you swim, say you're on a team in Florida, you will be outdoors a lot. Although, to be fair, anyone who swam competitively knows that that's really not that much of a concern about getting seriously sunburned, because they always have your ass out there at like fucking 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. and then like in the afternoons or something. But it's never, unless you're really training 3 times a day, which is a psycho degree, you're going to be swimming in the early mornings and the afternoon evenings. But yeah, cycling, I cycle to commute everywhere, and so it would be a 40-kilometer cycle race. I have to actually get a race bike. I have to like actually get used to clip-in pedals and stuff, because I've always used like the stirrup size pedals. But that's not that big of a deal. We're in the process of moving to a new studio. I cycle about 20 kilometers a day when I'm going back and forth between home and that place. So a 40K race, I need to train for it, but it's not like this Herculean thing. You know what I mean? It's just like, all right, twice your daily commute in a race. So go out, do that sometimes, maybe do a little extra, do some transitions from some biking to running, and be fine. But I'm not gonna lie, man. I've run a 10K twice since I got out of the army, but that shit fucking fell off. So like not really working out besides cycling or going to the gym, and not really running for a couple of years. Like I was a very good runner in the army, and I ran competitively in high school too. That's just fallen off so bad. It was weird. I got back to being able to run a 5K in like 6 days. Like it did, like running every other day. By day 3 of doing it, I was back to a 5K with no problem. But pushing it beyond that it's like, wow, I've really gotten old.
Yeah.
So
I do enough walking and enough exercise. Like I go to the gym a couple times a week, and I just have a routine. I stopped trying to do the, like I'm going to write it down. I'm going to have personal records. I'm going to have this. It's like, no, I just do these exercises for 45 minutes to strengthen core, shoulder, chest, whatever. And then I move on with my day, because I'm 38 and like, I don't have the time nor the energy nor the want to do most of the other stuff. But like, I gotta say, man, getting out of the army, I've never been in better shape. Probably because nobody's forcing me to do it, but also
that's good to hear. A lot of people get out and the army was the thing that was forcing them to exercise, and they don't, but they keep drinking like they're in the army, and then they suddenly realize they got to lose weight.
It helps that I got out when I was 38, not or 37 instead of when I was 24 or whatever, when I was still young enough to do stupid shit. Like, I'm too old to drink like I did back then anyway. So I got out of the army. I was already declining on my drinking because of weed, and so there's no there's just basically no reason for me to not. But I'm with, like, I can go running. I go running a lot more in the spring and the fall. I don't do it during the summer, obviously, because it's just too goddamn hot, and I don't wake up early enough to do. Like, my kid wakes up at 6:30. I'm not waking up earlier than that to go do a fucking run. But
yeah, sure.
I can hit 5K. I'm with you. Like, I can do 5K and I cannot want to die. But as soon as, like, I'm done with 5K and you say do another one, I'm not going to do that. That's not.
Yeah.
So I applaud you, like, in your mid 30s. Not only are you doing this, but also you're, like, learning the piano. Like, you're really coming into, like, your renaissance of who you are. Like, okay, it's time to do a new thing. So that's really, like,
live in a new country and everything.
Well, and it's, people, not everybody does that. People get stuck into a rut and they're like, well, I'm too old to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, you can just do things for fun. Like, I'm sure that you're learning the piano. You're not like, one day I'm going to be a concert, concerto pianist or something. It's like, this is fun. I like doing it.
Yeah.
And I want to, it's something that you enjoy doing. So
yeah,
everybody should have that.
So my background with piano is interesting to talk about that, in the sense that I played as a kid and I played as a teenager, and I liked it as a little kid when they'd let me play songs I liked, but regular piano exercises annoyed me. And, like, I think you have a little kid, you know how it is. When little kids don't want to do something, they will go out of their way to be aggressively creative to not do it. And I just didn't want to do it. So my parents finally gave up when I was about 10. And then when I was about 17 or 18, I kind of, like, fell back in love with like blues piano, R&B piano and stuff, and just, like, piano I'd hear in music and rock music and stuff like that. And so I started taking lessons again. And then, this is funny, but they would never let you do this now, and I don't think a competent ROTC program would let you do this now, back then even. But I was in an ROTC program, and for the 3 of the 4 years I was there, the professor of military science was like a what's the adjutant general officer. So he was like an Army HR guy who was massively addicted to painkillers and was just, like, completely out of his mind and not present at all. So the program was very poorly run. Like, they leaned super hard on, they had a good guard recruiter, but, like, the program basically didn't recruit any kids to be active duty scholarship, like, out of high school. One kid who did get a scholarship had to be kicked out of the program because they realized, after he tried to do an SF trick and dumped Tabasco sauce in his eyes to stay awake on an FTX, that he was mentally not really there, and they had to X him from the program. But the program was so poorly administratively run from the officer side, from the active duty Army side, that they just didn't really do a lot of oversight. And if you weren't, it was like being a kid in my family growing up. If you weren't to fuck up, if you weren't, like, conspicuously fucking up, no one was really paying attention. And which is how I got away with all the shit I got away with when I was a teenager. So basically, what I discovered was, as long as I stayed on track to graduate in 4 years, I was so far ahead of the average. And as long as my grades were good enough and I could pass the PT test, and I was, pretty good at that. I did Ranger Challenge or whatever. So I was, like, one of the higher scoring PT people in my program. I had really good grades. As long as I didn't mess up my grades and I wasn't going to take longer than was allotted to graduate, they didn't really give a shit. They didn't review my courses at all. That was the funny thing. Like, most programs that are strict, they would absolutely review if you were on scholarship. It was like, no, you're going to take what you need to graduate and your military science classes and nothing else, because the Army's paying for your school and they're not going to overpay. Well, me being a dumbass after my freshman year and realizing that, like, I got I got really high grades. I was like a 3.7 something my first semester and a 4.0 my second semester. So I was like, okay, this is easy. Like, I thrived in college in a way I didn't in high school, because I hate being over supervised and I hate being confined and having my time micromanaged. And so, like, being in the thing where I could just do it my own, I did really well. And what I discovered was, as long as I did all my credits and I took summer courses if I needed to, which to me was like, okay, if you're going to take an annoying class, you might as well just get it over in 6 weeks versus having to do it, over the course of the whole semester. Yeah. And so I took summer classes basically every year that I wasn't doing training, and I got credit that way. And one year I actually took a second 6 weeks, like, compressed course to fill a requirement. But basically, like, as long as I stayed on track, they didn't give a fuck what I was studying. as long as it like met my requirements for my degree. So, and also one other thing before I tell you the point of the story is that they didn't give a shit what you studied either. You could get a degree in anything. The only thing you were restricted from was nursing because the Army had its own nursing program. So like if you wanted to study nursing, you had to go through that program. And obviously like if you were pre-med and you were going to do like Army actual medical corps and be a doctor in the Army, like that was a whole different advanced recruiting thing. But you know, I had a friend who got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in metalsmithing and became a armor officer and then a civil affairs officer. I mean, most people got like degrees in political science or criminal justice, but I mean, there were some people who did some weird shit, and I was one of them. I was a journalism and French double major, and I also took piano classes every semester. And basically, I met with an instructor once a week for lessons who was a grad student in music, and I just learned more piano that way. So I got like more accustomed to it. I actually got an old Rhodes electric piano, which was a beautiful instrument. Kind of obviously one note, it has one sound, but it's a beautiful instrument. But then I got in the Army and had no time to play. I had no time to practice. You know, that piano was fucking in storage for a long time. And I just kind of gave up on it. But then, yeah, living here, we moved to our current place and I wound up moving into a house, and across the street from us is a guy who was like an extremely accomplished jazz and blues piano instructor and performer. And he, you know, was like, yeah, I'll happily take an adult student if you actually want to practice. And so I do. I practice all the time. And over the pandemic, I just started doing lessons over Zoom. And that's led to all the ridiculous songs that we've done for Trash Future and stuff like that. And me, you know, continuing on this path of trying to eventually just kind of start with rhythm and blues and then eventually become a jazz piano player. But I'm never going to be like a performer. I'm never going to be like a serious concert musician, but it's fun, and it lets you skip all the bullshit that like no one is like, you have to practice scales to be good at it, but no one is like, if you're not the sharpest on sight reading, it's not as big of a deal as long as like there's a lot of practical stuff. And there were plenty of people who were really accomplished piano players who probably maybe eventually got there, but didn't start out being like super smart on sight reading. Like it's just playing, it's knowing how to play, it's knowing how to know stuff from by ear, like chord shapes, stuff like that, scales, etc., like where you need to go with it. But it's very practical. And I don't know, that kind of like, I probably didn't have the maturity to do this when I was younger, but now I do, I guess. And it's fun. Like I genuinely enjoy it. It's like kind of my, especially when I'm coming up with new shit for dumb jokes, like it's genuinely like it makes me smile a lot. And if you know me in real life, you know that's rare. It's
a nice different avenue to go down with I don't know, just with content production. Like, what if we could make funny songs too? Well, who knows how to play the piano? Well, Nate, get on it.
Yeah, I play the piano and I play the bass guitar, and I've learned a lot about music composition software, and that's what we do. And Milo plays the regular electric guitar, and he plays the drums, and yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, man, I mean, it's weird.
I don't know how to do any, like, I never learned an instrument, and I was never put. My wife keeps talking about like, oh, we need to put Lily in piano practice or something, and it's just like, do we? Here's what I would say. I mean, like, as a kid who was basically told you may not learn any instrument until you learn the piano, and there's no way learning the piano is never a terminal thing. Like, the thing about it is you can play piano your entire life and still suck at it. Like, it's hard and it never gets easier. My take is piano is pretty good for learning the fundamentals of how music works, but that's not really that important with kids that age, ultimately, because like even if they learn it, unless they're really serious about piano, they're going to forget it. So parenting advice, if I'm allowed to give that as a non-parent, I would just say... This is a dad chat, you're good.
Yeah, full-on dad chat here. I would just say if there's an instrument that she gravitates towards that she wants to play, like the most important thing with kids and learning music is that they want to play and they want to practice. They're like excited to do it. And for me, when I was a little kid, I wanted to play the guitar. My parents said, no, they're like, you're too small. We don't want to buy a kid guitar, and then it's too small for you when you grow up. There's like a million excuses. I think they just didn't want to hear the noise. Not that my piano playing was any better. But when I was 13, they'd kind of changed their tune. So like, well, if he wants to play music, then let him play music, whatever, who fucking cares? And I wanted to learn bass guitar. And so I took lessons for that for years, and I really enjoyed bass, and I still play bass. And bass guitar is not exactly like the instrument that people are like, oh, my kid's going to be a, like fucking Yo-Yo Ma or some shit. Like it's incredibly important for actually playing music well. But let's be perfectly honest, in most, let's call it in the boomer canon of rock bands, the normal configuration for starting a band was the guy who was bad at guitar learned bass.
What if you just slowed it down a little bit and we got you something a little bit bigger and you just did one chord over and over?
Yeah. What if you just had 4 strings that were really big and you just played one note? I mean, that's basically...
Now do that for 5 minutes. Good. You're perfect. Don't change a thing.
Now I'll be honest with you. The thing about it is unless you're a nerd, bass is oftentimes very underappreciated.
I will say also, yes, a funky bass line really does add to a song. So I'm not trying to say that the bass player is not important, because a bass guitar can make or break a song, certainly. But also there's like when it comes to jobs in a band, bass guitar is one of the easier jobs, I assume. Yeah.
I would also say that a good example of it is a lot of stuff that you hear today, a lot of it synthesized, but obviously in rock music and stuff, bass isn't going to be super upfront and close present. But something I would point out to you is go back and listen to old Motown records or disco records. And the reason specifically I point out disco is that when disco was at its peak in the 70s, there were synthesizers. And I mean, if you look at some of the Bee Gees, more disco songs like Jive Talkin', you can hear they're using analog synthesizers to do a bass line. But it's got such a distinct sound that it's not the same as a bass guitar. And if you go back and you listen to some of these things like Diana Ross's Love Hangover or Don't Leave Me This Way, songs like that, those bass lines are so incredible. Like Bernard Edwards is a bass player for Chic. If you listen to the original Chic songs like Everybody Dance or Sister Sledge, what's it called? We Are Family, or Le Freak, or I Want Your Love. Like Bernard Edwards plays on all these songs. He's fucking incredible. The timing, the tone is so unreal. And the reason I point out the disco stuff is that stuff was all done in the era before you couldn't really comp recordings. What I mean by comp is like composites, cutting stuff up, reassembling. Like it was so laborious that you couldn't really do it if a take was bad. You had to nail it in a take. And so when you hear these guys playing and they're perfectly in fucking time and it's so bang on good, and like the performance, like it's complex, and it like that's all being done by a human being whose just ability to play and sense of rhythm was that dialed in. So like, yeah, if you're a nerd and you're a huge geek about music, then this is the kind of thing you'll probably notice, and if not, maybe you might not notice it. But the two things I would say is that the bass lines in Seinfeld cannot really be played by a human; those are a synthesizer. But if there were ever a human being who could play those, it would have been someone like Bernard Edwards. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, I got into bass in a huge way, and I think that as a, not saying musician, because I'm not really a musician,
You're
but someone
musician.
who plays,
you make music,
just like plays music.
Just like we are podcasters, we are content creators. Here we stand. I gotta tell you about my daughter. Starting her own podcast.
Hilariously, I've seen you post those photos of her like with like the kid laptop and the broke old microphone pretending to podcast. So she's actually doing it for real now?
Yeah, so we got her we had an Amazon tablet for school, and she reads books and everything on it. So we upgraded to a much better tablet, and she learned that she can do video on it, and she's always taken her photos of herself and done video of herself, but now yesterday, she started up Rescue Friends Radio, which and she's done 5 episodes so far. They range.
Oh my God!
They range between 2 minutes to, I think the longest is 8 minutes. One of them, like I said, we went to Chicago, and we talk about Route 66 a lot. So we were kind of traveling on Route 66 and stopped at some places that are very heavy Route 66 themed, and museums and things. So we have a big U.S. map on our wall, and it's got foam core behind it, so we can put pins in it to say, we've been here, as a family, places that we've been. So she did a whole episode where she goes from, Chicago and then follows the trail down to Los Angeles. But my favorite one yesterday was she had her pet, or her stuffed Pegasus, Peggy. Peggy was very nervous to be on camera. So at one point, she's talking to Peggy, and she looks at it and says, "Don't worry, Peggy, podcasters never fail." And I I lost and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that video and I'm going to pull that sound snippet and I'm going to put it on our Zencaster for us so that we can always put it on the soundboard so that anytime there's one of those like, oh, I'll cut that out moments, we could just play the "Don't worry, Peggy, podcasters never fail." So Rescue Friends Radio, look for it soon, I guess. I don't know. I'm probably not going to like actually upload any of this stuff. Maybe I'll pull the audio from it, but some of it does require the visual aspect of it. But
your daughter's what, 6, isn't she, or 5 or 6?
Yeah, she just turned 6 and she's got Rescue Friends Radio going. I guess if like she's gonna follow in my footsteps, I'd rather it be podcaster than soldier. So
yeah, fair. I mean, I remember doing fake radio shows with a slightly older friend of mine who, I guess she wanted to do what you might describe as sort of like a kid's take on what if Richard Pryor hosted Saturday Night Live but on the radio, and that was not good. She called it the Dirty Night Live, and like let's just say when our parents heard it, we got fucking banned from radio. Oh my god, I haven't thought about that in fucking forever, man. Yeah, weirdly, I wound up becoming a podcaster. You know, it only took a very long detour of about 25 years.
And well, the thing is, I told my wife, I'm like, podcasting is great because my daughter at times, like, she will have days where she just doesn't stop talking. And me and my wife are people who enjoy silence a lot. So when you have a 6-year-old who won't stop talking, that really starts to grate on your nerves, and she said yes, she's like, why don't you just record yourself talking? So like podcasting is fantastic for her because all she wants to do is talk and with nobody interrupting her. And that's what a podcast is. Obviously you and I have conversations back and forth, and she's already said that she wants me to be a mystery guest. So we'll see how that goes. But truly at the moment, it's just her staring into a camera, and she did a how-to video on how to make these little Play-Doh fish inside of like a little Play-Doh stamp thing. So she's got it down. She knows like what she wants to do with it, and she has the like, here's step by step. I've always said one day she's going to grow up and become a technical writer because she's just fantastic at step by step stuff. She's going to love 670-1 one day, I swear.
That's funny. Well, she happens in 6 degrees of separation know a technical writer because that's actually what my wife does. So
there we go.
There you have it.
Yeah, she's very detail oriented.
To ask, since I'm not a parent, one of my good friends from college, actually 2 really good friends from high school. We were friends in college, we were friends in high school, and his wife actually were friends. I was friends with her in middle school. They were dating all through high school, and then they got married, and they have a daughter. And when they post photos on Instagram, I swear to God, I'm always confused because their daughter looks like both of them, but like you it's like a trick of the eye. You could either be like, no, you look exactly like your dad, or you look exactly like your mom. And you've posted photos of Lily in our group chat, and like she completely looks just like those like 90s laser photo pictures of you that you've posted. Yes. And I'm always wondering, like, does it weird? Because I get weirded out when I find myself unintentionally recreating the same kind of like intonations, turns of phrase, etc., that my dad does. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks out of nowhere. I'll say something like reflexively, or I'll say something to Cynthia and be like, mention something. And then I'll realize like, that is 100% my dad's voice. And I'm sort of wondering, like, what is it like in reverse? Like, does it weird you out sometimes when you're looking, you're like, oh my God, she looks just like me, or she acts just like me as a kid or something like that?
Dude, she came out of my wife looking like me. Like, it was when they handed me my brand new baby, I was looking into a, like, if you took my head and shrunk it, like if you did a shrunken head thing, or if you just if you dehydrated my head like a raisin. It was like, oh, that's me. And like, there are some people, some studies say that, like, you know, a lot of times the kid comes out looking like the dad because the dad is just like, oh, that's obviously me. So I am the father of this child. So because I recognize myself in it, which is that makes sense, you know, post having mirrors. I don't really know how people were
sort of evolutionary kind of thing. Right. Yeah, sure.
But it is like, I basically leaned into it at this point. Like my father, I didn't really start doing a lot of gardening until, you know, the last couple of years. And really not until we moved into this house. Like there's so much moving into the house that we're in now, so much changed about how I do things because the last house was so big and it was so easy to be separated in it. And here, the kitchen, like our dining room, the play area, the living room, and the kitchen are all kind of in the same area, and there's no walls. So it's all very open and very communal, which is really nice. So I can I cook more. I used to not really cook that much because I would have to be in the kitchen away from everybody, and that was just boring. So now I cook more because I'm hanging out with everybody. I can turn the TV on, we can watch TV while I cook or whatever. But yeah, I definitely I notice me saying things that not only my father, but my older brother, who's 17 and a half years older than me. I find myself picking up his mannerisms too, and it's very strange because if you get me and my brother and my sister all together and have us start talking, a trained ear will hear all the differences in our accents because we're all raised in different parts of Missouri. So it's weird. So I start picking up my brother's Southern Missouri affectation sometimes, and my father grew up all over Missouri and Kansas, so I pick up a lot of his things. But yeah, I've noticed really the biggest thing is I go to my dad's house and I look at all the plants that he has, and I'm like, I want that, and I want that, and I want that, and he's like, yeah, next year I'll get you all that. Have you heard of something called a cup plant? It's this big,
I have not.
It's this big, tall, it's huge. It gets up to 9 or 10 feet, but the stem of it is rather than being cylindrical, it's like a square. And it's called a cup plant because all the leaves, as they hook onto the stem, rather than it being round, it holds water. So the cup plant is a thing that brings all kinds of pollinators and everything to your garden because it's a place to drink, not only a place to get food, but a place to drink. So there's so many things like that I'm really leaning into with with being a dad and realizing that that's just who I am, because the thing is I don't have bad memories of my father. So me doing these things, whether I'm doing them on purpose or whether they are just the product of me being raised by my father, it's still I notice it. I'm just oh yeah, my dad used to do that. That's funny. Well, I guess I'll continue to do it because it didn't piss me off when dad did it. So I know it is weird the first couple of times it happens. And it's still on occasion I still do catch myself and just kind of marvel at it. But my dad's still around, so it's I can kind of talk to him about it. But yeah, it's the same when my parents see Lily kind of acting up because she's hungry or she's tired or something, and it's just God, she won't shut up. She's doing this, she's doing that. And then you have your parents just yeah, it fucking sucks, doesn't it? Yeah. This is all the only time I say that people should have kids is if you have parents who are living, because that they deserve to see you suffer compared to how much suffering you gave them. That's the whole reason to continue the species is just so that your parents can look at you and go yeah, it fucking sucks, doesn't it? And don't worry, one day you'll get to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it's funny because my dad is super chill now, and he wasn't growing up because he was a field grade officer, infantry officer in the Army. Sure, you got to be retired. A specific way. Yeah, and he retired, and then he he worked in civilian jobs for a while, and then he retired fully. And once he retired fully, he really, really chilled out in a way that it's kind of unnerving to me now because I just don't recognize it by comparison. I've gotten used to it, but yeah, he's so much chiller now. And it's weird but from doing farming stuff, because, they raise sheep, they just have orchard trees and stuff. They, grow fruit and things like that, but they actually raise sheep and sell them for meat. And he's probably, I would say he's in as good a shape as he was when he was in the Army now, after coming up on 10 years of farming all the time. Because he's always out doing stuff, something with the animals, or, baling hay or fixing stuff or woodworking, or building, assembling things, correcting things, stuff like that. When they actually get the sheep, he was telling me the other day that they raise the sheep, and the lambs, they keep the ewes, they sell they keep the female lambs, and they sell the male lambs once they're past a certain age to go be processed for meat. And they have to they sometimes are selling old ewes as well, and they have to herd these animals and like more or less pick them up and put them in the truck and stuff like that. And you know, my dad's 68 and he's fucking hauling these gigantic animals around. I mean, they are big. They're not like, you know, hippopotami, but like they're big as hell.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta be in shape. To do any of kind of that stuff, one, you have to be in shape, which is why I like gardening, because my dad's almost 80 now. I don't know if he's almost 80 or if he just turned 80. Doesn't look 80 whatsoever. No, I think he just turned 79. But you know, he's got a big yard. He's got a lot of area to garden. And also, like, yeah, you can't be a hard ass and do any of this stuff, because like you have to have patience, and like growing things and fixing things and building things all take time and patience. So like it's kind of like you know, your dad got out of the army and he's got this whole like different, he can be a different person now. He can reinvent himself going forward. And I really like that concept for people. And I hope more people, like, as you know, let's be honest, most of the people on Twitter are about our age, at least the people that we hang out with. So if you're listening to this and you're coming up on your 30s, don't worry. It's not as bad as you think. It just means that things slow down a little bit, but that means that you can process things a little bit more and you can go do things that you want to do. Hopefully that's the plan. Yeah.
I mean, obviously everyone's circumstances are different. You know, for me, I think entering my 30s, and you know, I realized talking to a friend the other day that I've been so sort of fixated on the fact that like 37 is actually undeniably close to 40 that I've forgotten that I'm not 37 yet. That I've basically been acting like I'm 40 this whole time since I turned 36 last year. But I would say, yeah, like there's certain things that are definitely humbling in the sense that you really can't physically do the stuff that you used to, or at least it takes you longer to recover unless you've basically been training and you've been like really keeping up with it. Like, yeah, if you're a professional athlete and you've been, you know, training since you were a kid and you've been on this stuff forever, it's one thing. But if you're a regular person, like you will slow down. So that's a little humbling. And if you drink recreationally, you know, like you'll find that stuff like that you can't keep up the way you used to. So there are things where you're like, all right, well, I'm undeniably older. But it's also other things too that I think are great, which is that I feel as though, especially when you're in your early 30s, like typically you've kind of gotten to the point where you've identified like what it is you like and don't like, and you feel a little bit less obligated to pretend to like the things you don't like. And that frees you up in a lot of ways to just sort of start embracing and cultivating interests and stuff and not feeling as though you have to be self-conscious about it. Like, yeah, I'm a, you know, huge fucking nerd about certain things, but like, I don't really care. I mean, like if I was trying to impress people in their early 20s, that would be really embarrassing because for one, like I remember when I was, you know, 22 and like if someone who was 37 was trying to be cool to me, I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have been impressed.
But at the same time, if I hung out with myself at 22 at the age of 37, I would be like, this kid's an asshole and I don't want to be anywhere near him. Why will he not stop drinking and smoking and saying just the most horrible shit?
Yeah, I was thinking about the other day that there was some stuff, some details from travels and things from when I lived in Korea that I would be interested in sort of revisiting because, you know, I'd have friends who are going to spend time there and, you know, make recommendations. But then I'm like, I don't really know if I want to go back and read any of the old emails that I wrote when I was 27, 28, 29, because I think I'm going to come across like a fucking asshole. And quite frankly, there's going to be this almost shock of, call it lack of recognition. Like, did I really write this way? It's like when I found my like flailing attempt at writing a journal when I was 12 and 13, and I'm writing about like, I really want to buy a DVD player so I can watch Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. I'm like, I fucking hate those movies. Like, what? But yeah, when I was 13, I liked that stuff. You know what I mean? It's just that weird sort of lack of recognition it's not to say you were putting it on or that you were faking that. It's just that you've matured so much and your frame of reference is so different now that but going back, it's almost impossible to even remember when you actually believed that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I fucking was a Republican once upon a time because I just didn't. And look, eventually you gain information and you get like when I say a Republican, I mean 2001, 2002 Republican, which is decidedly less racist than currently, or at least less out loud racist. And I'm sure that people are
it was extremely. They were extremely Islamophobic, but they weren't talking about Jewish space lasers in public yet. Which is not to say not to excuse the Islamophobia side, but more along the lines of it's changed and it's gotten more overtly insane. I was never hell yeah, Republican Party, but I was sort of like, I was raised in a suburb of Indianapolis, like my parents voted Republican. I was sort of like, yeah, I'm kind of flirting with libertarianism, but
I feel every like because I had the same thing, like you and me reading Redwall, joining the military, being a libertarian, and then eventually becoming a socialist. It's just like the pipeline of boring middle class white dude to socialist is reading a bunch of books about mice at war and briefly being a libertarian until you're just like, wait a minute, socialism is just libertarianism, but you're not an asshole to everybody and you're just friends with everyone and everybody works together. Libertarians are, I'm going to shoot you if you get near my mountain of canned beans. So what if I did the other one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the aspect of not the libertarianism as it was sort of posited to people in the early 2000s in America seemed like a retreat from a lot of the deranged culture war stuff from the right, like basically, you know, not caring about people's sexuality, not caring about people's race, not caring about people's religion and that kind of a thing. But then, you know, if you were paying attention to it, you see how whenever those people get into positions of influence, it seems almost invariably that they gravitate towards, I want to take away the state's ability to stop people being racist. And the joke that libertarianism in 4 words is pothead who is racist. Like, let's not pretend that the aspect of the idea that you could, you know, libertarianism had a huge draw, I think, because of back in those days, the idea of weed ever being illegal definitely seemed like a, forgive the turn of phrase, pipe dream. So, you know, that stuff has changed over time. But I would say that, yeah, man, I mean, I read Redwall books and I was like, I want to go on quests and eat huge feasts, so I have to move to England. And then lo and behold, I do not, in fact, live in an abbey and my name is not Martin the Warrior. But, you know,
nobody's found a sword for you. You haven't had to solve a bunch of riddles around the house to get a sword and fight a guy with a big whip tail.
I don't have a bunch of Ponzi rabbits who speak in weird upper class accents and love going on fucking, you know, like long recons, and I'm not surrounded by moles who all speak like Welsh people for some reason.
I really feel like the rabbits were kind of like, look, Brian Jakes has passed and everything, but like as I grow up and I learn more and I read more about, you know, the wars and whatnot, I'm like, ooh, the rabbits really feel like Rhodesians sometimes.
Just here's the thing I say: the rabbits are so upper class in their affect, and the way they're sort of like sort of like the officer class of the upper echelons of British society, but transplanted into animals, which then posits the theory that all of the rabbits in the Redwall universe have been covering up pedophilia scandals in the rabbit service academies. So like, you don't really want to go down that route too far of identifying the rabbits as upper class English people, because then you have to get into like, and also they're rabbits, so you know they fuck a lot. So like, how far does that 1-to-1 comparison go? You know, it's just.
Also, all we ever see are like the hairs around Salamandastron and maybe a few of the other long patrol ones, but like we never see the rabbits that are subjugating India or like stealing things out of the Congo. Find some Belgian rabbits that are horribly mutilating people for rubber plants or something like that. You know, like if you're gonna do it, go all in. I say let's really, like, where's the rabbits that are getting trounced in Afghanistan by what would the Mujahideen be if we were gonna
say what would they be? Because the rabbits are always posited as like the good guys, but I mean obviously the British weren't the good guys, so it's a question of like, were the Mujahideen, were the Ghilzai like stoats and martens, or were they like Central Asian animals? You know, were they snow foxes or like, you know what I'm talking about? You know, were they what animal would they have picked? I'm not sure, but I will say this too. One thing that I find really funny about reading the Redwall books is that if you were an American kid and you read those books, you know, religiously the way that you and I did, and a lot of my friends who wound up in the army did, you have a like overdeveloped lobe in your brain for remembering all the distinct kinds of furry woodland creatures in Europe, because like he had to differentiate them so much that you're like, I didn't know what the fuck a pine marten is,
or a stoat. I had to look up a stoat,
weasel, stoat, all these things.
Voles come into it in some
voles
place.
versus moles versus badgers, versus otters, but there's never any nautical creatures. There aren't any seals that I'm aware of. Like otter is as nautical as it gets. In the Redwall, the first book, there's conversations around Clooney causing a stampede of cows that like destroyed a town, which sounds like a town of humans, but the humans never come back, nor do cows. So like, I'm not really sure about the epistemology of the Redwall animal kingdom. But what I will say is it has been weird to grow into stuff and not feel like, just the idea of being able to have a conversation about Redwall and not feel self-conscious about reading, Furry Mice Warrior Feast books. That's the kind of thing you kind of grow into as you get older, I suppose. And I don't know, it's been weird to me. But I will also say, coming back to your previous point, I think that the thing that changed my mind and made me trend towards being a lib and then further left and further left and further left to where I am today was I moved to the Republican paradise of Alaska, and a state that wealthy that has so cynically manipulated this sort of idea of like rugged individualist, and there's the level of poverty and deprivation that unnecessarily exists there. That country, that state could be as well apportioned in its welfare state as fucking Norway. It has more money than Norway, and they just don't. And now, because oil prices are down, they're just doing brutal austerity on the state, despite having this massive fucking permanent fund. Like, it's the grimmest thing, man. And it was bad in 2008, and it's bad now. And so I just I changed my politics and stuff. And I would absolutely regret the stuff that I said back in those days, and I cringe at it. And I think anybody who's being honest, unless, their parents were like Marxist academics and now they're huge cops working for the Democrats, they probably grew up similarly if they're, certainly if they're white dudes like us. And, I don't think it's wrong to admit that you moved your politics shifted and you changed and you educated yourself and you learned from experience and things like that. And
I don't know if you've seen Matt Damon has been saying, oh, I didn't use the F slur ever in my life. And it's like, I don't think anybody believes that, but you can just be like, look, we all said a lot of really embarrassing things when we were kids, and we don't do that anymore because we were a kid. Like I know that the thing is that there's a fear of like being canceled for like who you were 20 years ago, and not who you are now. So I understand that fear, especially when you're in a public kind of eye like Matt Damon is, but like also Matt Damon, don't fucking lie to me. Don't
Mark Wahlberg hasn't been canceled for literally hate criming a Vietnamese dude in the 80s. So like, don't get the fuck out of here. Like, don't pretend you're a white guy from Boston. Like, don't tell me you never used slurs. Like, come on, I've met white people from Boston. Like, literally,
slurs is punctuation.
Everybody, I think people grow, and I think the big point is, to be honest with yourself about it. And what would you rather do? Would you rather have people be like, oh no, you're born into this politics from your parents, and if you change your politics ever, you're a hypocrite, so just go on doing shit you don't actually believe? Like, come on, man. I think that we drifted over time towards socialism because it reflected the situation we are experiencing in our daily lives and the people in our lives we're experiencing and stuff like that. So I don't know, man.
Apparently there are seals in I looked it up, the Redwall wiki. Here's the thing that I absolutely love about the internet is that literally everything has a wiki, and there's somebody who like, oh, Ballwag, yeah, let me tell you about Ballwag from the Legend of Luke, and here's all this stuff about him. There's been two seals, but it seems like most of the Redwall series is very land-based, and the otters are river otters, and on occasion there are sea otters, but there's not a whole lot of distinction made between the two of them.
I wonder if like the difference between river otters and sea otters is the difference between like Dutch and South Africans or something like that. That like sea otters are way more racist.
There is a different. I feel like there was a distinction between them, but they're still both technically good because they're otters. Like
there is something to be said for the predestination of the animal species in Brian Jakes' books. That like, no, if you're a rat, you're gonna be a fucking asshole. Like that's just how it is. All rats are assholes, and it's like, I mean, we can say that about cops, but you weren't born a cop. Like you have to kind of at some point you have to make a decision if you want to be a cop or not.
And very, very rarely do you ever find females of the bad species. So it's like, where are all of these new rats and stoats and whatnot coming from? Like, where are the families that are raising these battle-hardened seafaring creatures or whatever? But you know what? Also, it's a fantasy book written for blind kids, so maybe we shouldn't read too much into it.
I would say also it's funny too. It makes sense why he had to introduce that like the rabbits were like archers or had like fencing swords or whatever. Because if you ever seen a stoat attack a rabbit, stoats are like 1/10 the size of a large adult rabbit, and like they basically jump on them and destroy them like they're a big fucking meaty slipper. It's unbelievable. Like rabbits have no defenses besides make loud noise and hope bigger predator comes.
Yeah. Yeah, all rabbits do are scream. So, but at least in Brian Jakes' thing, they're mighty warriors. So I don't know. Maybe he wanted to do
he wanted justice and restitution for all the rabbits he saw getting just brutally fucked up all over whatever part of England that he's from, because that is absolutely a thing. Like you'll be out and you'll hear it just sounds like a baby being murdered. And it's either foxes mating or it's a rabbit getting eaten by another furry woodland creature.
It's either a fox getting fucked or a rabbit getting fucked.
Yeah. Different versions of the same word. We've got a bonus, and I want to plug it since this is going to be a main episode. I did want to talk about the story recently about the Lake of the Ozarks resort and how it's just become like COVID denier place. But we decided to do a dad chat today because I think we were both in that kind of brain mode. So I will say, this week, I did a bonus with Alice Caldwell Kelly of the many podcasts, to include Trash Future, Well, There's Your Problem, and Kill James Bond, 2 of which I produce. Sorry, I have to plug my own stuff. But Alice and I talked about the 2009 Armando Iannucci movie In the Loop, which is sort of like The Thick of It / Veep, but about the Iraq War. And it features James Gandolfini as a very salty American lieutenant general. And we really liked James Gandolfini's performance, and Peter Capaldi being this just disgustingly smug shithead Scottish guy. So we just kind of talked about that and general stereotypes of general officers and, you know, the special relationship, if you will. So I'll play some of that. And if that sounds interesting to you, there is a link to that episode on Patreon in the show notes. And just bear in mind, everything on our Patreon is $5. So all the bonus episode going back all the way to 2016 available if you sign up for $5 a month. Some of the things that are sort of obliquely being referenced, like you said, the neocon who hates hearing swear words and stuff like that, like the weirdly prudish neocon. In like the credits sequence, there's like a thing of him being mad about like some the movie I Heart Huckabees being recommended film viewing for the military or something like that. Like he's just fucking furious.
I'm pretty certain that happened. Like that's just a takeoff of something that it may have been Rumsfeld, because Rumsfeld was notorious for being just personally insane, and yet also really sort of prudish and banal. Like if you look at, for instance, some of the torture authorization memos. There'll be something in there about, we're going to authorize stress positions for 3 or 4 hours or whatever. And there'll be a handwritten margin note from Rumsfeld that says something like, well, I stand for 7 or 8 hours a day. What's the problem with that? And it's just like, this man is extremely banal and extremely stupid and also extremely malign personally.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever told you this story before. I think I have told it on Hell of a Way, but some of our listeners may not recognize it. That one of the things that I remember being tickled by, if you want to call it that, was some of the weird shit we get in like any soldier care packages, like care packages that are just given out to to be given to anyone. So they would get them, they'd dole them out, the USO would dole them out, and we'd just get boxes or just things that were like addressed to any soldier. And invariably it'd be like letters from, Sunday school kids,
like crayon drawing
of you like shooting rockets out of a helicopter somehow, like dropping rockets out of a helicopter, or Jesus stuff, or like some guy I remember this. He sent a copy of his self-published novel about like a murder mystery in a mine, like an old-timey mine in like a town in Washington or in Idaho or something like that. But the mine was called like the Tubal Cain mine, and he just called the book Tubal Cain. But he decided as a cover to have just like, the best way to describe it is like 3D rendered water with a sunset that looked like Wave Race 64. Not really a murder mystery cover. But one of the films that someone had sent, maybe to be as a fuck you to us, maybe it was a future Trash Future listener, they sent a copy of the documentary of like the Chicago 7. And it was what's it called? Part documentary, part period footage, part like weird bad like flash animation.
Oh no.
And I mean, it was obviously very anti-war and very anti-military. Like, you know, and there's lots of stuff of people like, you know,
the Chicago PD, like
Jerry
dragging
Rubin,
Bernie away,
and stuff like that. And you know, whoever the guy was that I like, I said Abby Hoffman, the guy that John Lennon brought on when he guest hosted the Tonight Show, who called Nixon a pig, and like the NBC got fined for this. So like. Anyway, this film, someone must have watched it before me because I found it on the rack of free DVDs that were given out, and someone in a large Sharpie had just written movie on it, but they had spelled it Faget. So I'm just
it's nice to see that they were deploying Pasolini fans.
But that's the thing, right? Is that like, so to me, I feel like now this film was maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek and probably sympathetic to the I watched it, I mean, it was fine, it was kind of stupid, sympathetic to the anti-war cause, but like that's the level of vitriol that it produced in the average person. So I guess in a way that brings me back to the fact that like perhaps just treating this as a comedy and like, you know, having the venality be front and center made this kind of like a more radical statement. Yeah,
I think so. And ultimately, what we see in the movie is the UK provides the intelligence, the dodgy dossier that allows the UN Security Council to authorize the invasion of Iraq. They fictionalize Ahmed Chalabi, Curveball, as Iceman, this one single informant who is sort of like meth-addled and, fictionalizing everything.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, that basically we didn't go into detail, but the way they create the dodgy dossier is basically by cutting and pasting and omitting sections from this junior American staffer's sort of research paper on, you know, the case pro and con for war that wound up siding pretty heavily in the con side. And so, like you said, here's this person who thought that she was doing something good with her life and career, and her career big milestone gets butchered up to be used.
We see her at the end attached to Linton Barrack's staff, so she's like fully been subsumed by the machine, which I like. I think it's quietly one of the best things about this movie.
Yeah, and
I have a critique on the other hand.
Go ahead, please.
And my critique for this is also Malcolm Tucker. And I meant to say this about 20 minutes ago, and I left that other half of the sentence back there. But like Malcolm Tucker is also the weakest half of this movie because I feel like he's too epic.
That is true. Yeah, I could say that.
He's kind of too designed for like YouTube compilations. Like, if you remember 2009 YouTube and what that was like, Malcolm Tucker destroys whatever. It just kind of like, some of it feels like it's sort of like written for that purpose. And I think it would be a stronger movie if they sort of toned down the sort of like, I don't know, the sort of like explosive aspect of his character.
Yeah, it's basically like Number 10's press office is run by Francis Begbie.
Yeah, Scotland's angriest man.
Yeah, I think also the thing that I would say is I really appreciate James Gandolfini's performance. I will say that I think that one thing it sort of glosses over, oversimplifies, is that by the time that you are of that rank, you kind of have to know how the game is played in Washington because that's where you've been spending a lot of your time.
Yeah, I mean, this comes back to the discussion that we had that inspired us doing this episode, which was sort of the different personalities of sort of general officers as opposed to your colonels or your Navy captains or whatever. And I said sort of half jokingly that I think colonels are so weird because it's the highest you can get with any of the like really oppositional personality disorders.
Yeah, I would say that too. I would say that, you know, a lot of people don't make it or choose not to stay in to make it to colonel, but the ones who do, like, you know, by and large, that's the end. Like, you have to be confirmed by Congress, and like the Army's pretty, like, I don't know about the other branches of service. I imagine they're worse because they're so much smaller than the Army, but the Army is pretty blunt. They're like, yeah, you're not getting promoted. Like, we're not putting you up for congressional confirmation and whatnot. And that does have to happen. You have to be confirmed by Congress to be appointed to brigadier general, you know, to any of the general officer ranks. Same for all the other branches of service.
Yeah, and I guess like it makes anyone weirder to potentially stay another, you know, 10, 15, 20 years in the same job where you know you're not moving upwards.
But that being said, though, somebody as fucking psycho as Mike Flynn managed to get confirmed multiple times. And I think the reason for that is because Mike Flynn was really good at running. So, like, never overestimate how much that counts for things in the Army. Yeah, I was taken aback. I think if I were to say this, I thought Gandolfini, weirdly, for not being anybody with any military experience, manages to kind of get the sort of bearing of a senior military officer pretty well, because he could have gone Tom Sizemore in Saving Private Ryan and been a little more like that, but that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. I think he does do it pretty convincingly. I would say, to me, his demeanor seems more like something I could believe out of a colonel than a full colonel than out of a general. And maybe it's because I had a boss brigade commander who looked kind of like that and acted kind of like that, but with a little more Malcolm Tucker thrown in when he was mad. So that's one of those things where I think they did a great job casting him, and I'm glad he was in this role because it's fun seeing him do something where he's not just, hey, whoa, I'm Tony Soprano. You know what I mean? Like,
and he does authoritative in a way that I think is quite sort of subtly played, because he's like, obviously James Gandolfini was a big guy, and I think he actually like bulked up a little bit to do this movie. Because he uses that sort of physical presence a great deal, and he sort of dominates all of the shots with the Class A uniform with the like wall of ribbons. Yeah,
kind of a bull in a china shop sort of affect.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. Yeah, you're right. Like, you know, and Tony Soprano had that too. Like in that character, some of these things where he's just sort of like a big guy having to not do big guy things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like having to restrain himself from just being a huge Goomba on people. And I feel like there's that same kind of tension in his portrayal of General Miller. Like it's weird. It's just. This isn't necessarily a movie I'd watch again, but I do appreciate some of the finer details of it. I do appreciate the pacing a lot. Like, that's something that Iannucci is really good at. I mean, all the things I've seen by him, the pacing has been excellent. And so I think, it's a fun movie. I would recommend it.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting us in whatever ways that you do. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, and follow the podcast at Hell of a Way on Twitter. Check out the store, the writings, and everything like that. And for everybody else, Nate, we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, take care.